You've been an advocate for how many years now?
I was at the Office of the Female Advocate for about 8 years.
For 8 years. Tell us a bit about your professional life. What has been your experience? How has it prepared you for the position you've applied for?
After I completed my law degree, I did my articleship at a law firm known as Basedonot Attorneys. After being admitted as an attorney, I worked at the same law firm as a PA. And then for a short period of time, I went to work at a Legal Wise. Then I went back to this law firm again. Then when I left this law firm, I moved to the Family Advocate's office. And whilst I was at Basedonot Attorneys, I had one stint of acting at the magistrate court. And then when I was at the Family Advocate's office, before I could come over to the OCJ like this year, I had one acting stint 2012 at the Free State Division. And as far as I can say, far back from 2012 when I first started acting, it has exposed me to a lot of experience. It gave me a lot of exposure, although it was a short acting stint. I didn't gain much at that time. But then since this year to now, I've gained much more experience, and it has prepared me quite well for this position. And I believe with the necessary further exposure, because experience comes over time, with the necessary further exposure, and I'll be better, even more prepared. But currently at this stage, I feel it is from my day of admission as an attorney to date, I've been well prepared and well experienced and knowledge with regard to the post of serving on the bench.
Stepping back a bit, what was your master's degree about?
My master's degree was about contacts of the children with their fathers. I realized that when I was at the Family Advocate's office, a lot of the mothers refused the fathers to exercise their contact rights, and they had a lot of reasons for that. So I did a research in it to find out what are their reasons why they're refusing the mothers to see their children, and especially post-divorce, and especially when there's issues of maintenance. So the master's was all about finding out why are the mothers refusing for the fathers to exercise their contact rights with their children.
Very well. JP?
Thank you, CJ. Advocate Chesiwe, you've already alluded to the fact that your first acting stint was one term in 2012. Is that correct?
Correct, so.
Is it also correct that at the beginning of this year you attended an advanced aspirant judges course?
Yes, I attended aspirant advanced course training in January.
Did you find it beneficial?
It was quite beneficial because it teaches you how to handle self in court, how to go into writing judgments. It's quite an experience because when you start acting, there's a lot of things that you don't know. And when you go to this training, there's a lot of things that you are taught that you need to look at and how to go about. Because obviously, as a legal person, when it comes to the bench, there's a lot of things that you still have to learn to know how to, specifically, especially when it comes to writing of judgments. So the training was quite an experience, and it helped me a lot also.
Yes, and you've been acting now, talking about 2016 from the beginning of the year.
In January.
Yes. And have you been exposed to a wide spectrum of work, different types of cases?
Since I've been acting since January, I've been exposed to all kinds of work. Criminal, civil, reviews, everything that is done in the High Court has been exposed to it. And I believe in far as all those duties were allocated to me, I performed them to my best of my abilities.
Did you experience any challenges in any specific area?
Challenges that I've experienced would be mostly having, for example, when you have a case that you have to do and then having to research on it, especially when you know you've got limited time to do the case. then the only challenges is having to research on those cases. But fortunately, the library staff and the researchers are quite helpful when it comes to researching any matters that you need to attend to or that you need to research for purposes of writing your judgment or for purposes of preparing before you go into the court to do a trial. But it's not much of big challenges. It's challenges that you can manage.
Now, having been exposed to a wide variety of work, would you say that you are coping?
I'm coping very well. I've to the extent that I've done circuit court a lot also. All of the Free State, the circuit courts that we do, I've been to the circuit courts. And in between your circuit courts, you still come back to come and do your court work that you are allocated to. It's a time that when I did one circuit court in Kroonstad, I did a prison visit on your request, which I submitted a report. So as far as the workload is concerned, I have coped well with it.
So in addition to your normal workload, you also had to do a prison visit,
Which I did in
respect of which you have submitted a report.
Yeah.
Did you manage quite well fitting that into your ordinary work?
I did it quite well because I was doing a circuit court in Kroonstad and they adjourned on that specific day, and I was able to make an arrangement with the head of correctional services to go and make a visit at the prison. And because it was Women's Month, I did a visit of the whole prison. But specifically because it was Women's Month, my focus was more on the section of the women section and the children, although I visited the male section also. But the report was about all of it, but the focus was mostly on the children and the women in prison. And I coped within that period because I was able to write the report and submitted the report. And as I said, when I submitted the report, I took some pictures and wrote the report such that there's pictures that shows what is happening in prison.
Indeed, it was a very detailed report. Now that you have done circuit court duties, and I think on the last occasion you were there for 3 weeks.
3 weeks,
yes.
Continuous.
What are your views about female judges having to do circuit court work?
My views with regard to circuit court, because circuit court is part of high court. So if you are in the high court, it's not like you're supposed to be allocated certain duties as a female. The fact that we say we need to be empowered, we cannot say I can only do a certain portion of the work, I cannot do another portion. I cannot say I cannot do circuit because I'm a female, I cannot leave my family behind, I cannot go to the circuit due to whatever circumstances. My take is when the circuit court, it should be allocated to all the judges who are in the division. It shouldn't have an exception to female. If you are a female, obviously with young children, and when the role shows you are going on circuit court, I would think you would make arrangements to ensure that if you've got young children that they're taken care of, or alternatively young in the sense that you might have a baby. Well, in my case, I don't have any babies coming forth. You might say, JP, I have a baby, and to go to circuit, can you give me at least 6 months to just make sure that I don't leave my baby alone? I believe within your division, you can make arrangements with your JP. But in my view, circuit court shouldn't be an exception only to the male judges. It should apply across the board for everybody.
Now, in addition to all the types of cases that you have had to preside over in open court, you have also had occasion to do pre-trials?
I have done pre-trials for the last 2 weeks when I was on circuit duty, on recess duty. I did pre-trials for 2 Mondays consecutively. So, in fact, throughout the year, there were times that I've been allocated for pre-trials. So I've done a lot of pre-trials also.
So you have been actively involved in case management? I've been
actively involved in case management. For example, when recently I had a file that the divorce was instituted in 2013, and the attorneys wanted to postpone it. And I told them this divorce comes from 2013. And I failed to see in the file where there's any reasons for continuous dragging. They wanted to postpone the matter. So I said to them, we cannot postpone this matter. These parties don't even have assets anymore. There's no reason to fight, to take it any further, to postpone it. Can we get this matter settled? And they went back, they came back. Matter was settled and divorce was finalized.
Thank you, JP. Premier?
Through you, CJ, thank you. Afternoon, Advocate.
Afternoon,
yeah. I just want to check what is your understanding in terms of separation of powers.
My understanding of separation of powers is that. Can I have a little bit of water, please? I don't have any water. Thank you. Thank you, Premier. Understanding of separation of power is that for the three branches that we have of separation of power, the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary, these three branches are supposed to cooperate with each other, but not encroach on each other. For example, if the executive gives out, if the legislature gives out legislature, the courts must implement those legislatures. Executive cannot, the legislature cannot, for example, in doing cases where issue legislature and at the same time want to implement their own legislatures. If legislature is given out, it's the court's functions, the court's duties to do such imposing of those legislations. For example, when you look at the case of Lannister, where the court said separation of power is a doctrine that is it's a constitutional design thing. It cannot be done away with. And in one case of the Lange versus Smith, where the Constitutional Court again said, where an executive member cannot send to prison a person who's an uncooperative witness, that's the duties of the court. And in another case where it was said, where the legislature has determined or given the prescribed minimum sentence, they cannot impose the sentence on the prisoner. That is the duties of the court, to impose sentence on prisoners. So these three branches cannot encroach on each other, but they need to cooperate with each other. For example, if the court gives out orders to whichever branch it's applicable to, meaning to all citizens of the country, when the court issue out orders, all of these branches, or whoever the citizen is applicable to, they must comply with those court orders. So these three branches are quite important, and they are part of the Constitution, and they have to work with each other, but not encroach on each other.
My second and last question is, why do you want to become a judge? And if appointed, what will be your contribution to the transformation of the judiciary and society in general?
Why do I want to become a judge? I feel I need to become like an instrument of justice. I need to contribute to the system. I need to contribute to the people out there to show that the justice system is a working tool. I feel as an attorney or as an advocate, you have to persuade the judge on behalf of your client. But as a judge, you make the decision. And most of the time, those decisions that you make decisions that will contribute or will assist those poor communities out there. And in respect of giving out your court, your judgments must show independency, that you are able to contribute to the community. And with regard to transformation of the community, what we used to do before I went to the bench, we would go out there and talk to community members. You tell them how the justice system works. You make them aware that there's rights involved in, because sometimes not everybody knows how the courts work. Not everybody knows how the justice system works. So as a judge, you have to show people, especially when they appear in your court, especially when you have those people who come to court unrepresented, you need to guide and direct them that how the courts will work. You need to assess them, because you find people who say, I don't want legal aid, I don't have money for an attorney, but I want to represent myself. So whilst you are sitting on that bench, you have to guide and direct that litigant to ensure that his rights or the trial is done such that he is not treated unfairly.
Thank you, Premier. Commissioner Modise.
Thank you, CJ. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Ma'am Modise.
I know the Premier just asked you why you want to become a judge. Can you give me what makes a good judge?
Makes a good judge. is the skills that you have. You must have integrity, honesty. You must be able to serve the profession with the best of your abilities. You must be competent and diligent. You must, judicial duties must take preference. You must be able to serve the bench with all the honesty and reputation, and you must, as much as possible, minimize any conduct that will affect your reputation. It's not like you must be a perfect human being, because we cannot be perfect as human beings, but you try your utmost best to have that kind of conduct and character, that not, even if you are criticized by whoever criticizes you, but you must be able to take anything that comes to you with professionalism and treat people with respect and be cautious, be patient, be a respectable citizen that people can, the citizen out there or the community can look up and say, you know what, this is a respectable person, and the characters that he or she displays are the characters of a judge that we can say it's a kind of a fit and proper person who is competent to do the duties of a judge.
Does the understanding of the law, the constitution, come into any play in the description you have just given?
It definitely comes into play. Your description, the understanding of the constitution, understanding of the law, the knowledge of the law, and how to apply it and how to analyze.
Ms. Chesiwe, what if I say to you that you left me quite confused in your description of the doctrine of the separation of powers? I really didn't understand half the things you said. The only part that I understood was that there were 3 branches. That was correct, but the next I didn't understand. So that is why it is important for me to ask you why you really want to become a judge.
The executive, which is the governing body of one of the branches, the legislature, which is the body that does the legislation, then we have your judiciary, that is part of the courts, that controls the independence of the courts.
Ma'am, that is exactly where you lose me. There is the executive, there is the legislature, there is the judiciary. All 3 of them do separate things. You do get the part right when you move on to the encroachment and so on and so forth. But I'm going to step off that, CJ, and ask you what you understand about judicial accountability.
Judicial accountability, what I understand is accountability that the courts must put forward to the community out there. That the courts must be independent. Judges shouldn't be influenced by anything, whether it's outside pressure, whether it's media or politicians or anything. The judicial accountability, the courts must be able to present judgments without fear, favor, or prejudice, and be impartial, and be able to present their judgment without being impartial or biased. And most important, the sign that the courts must be independent of any pressure from outside.
CJ, I'm going to let it go.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Commissioner Nyambi.
Thank you, CJ. Afternoon.
Afternoon, sir.
I must confess that I'm impressed by the CV to see somebody that has been a nurse for some years and ultimately end up doing what you are doing currently. Maybe if you can share with us what are the frustrations that you see that make us to be able to deal with the issue of gender transformation when it comes to judiciary. But despite what we have done before, and now they are seated there.
Issues with regard to gender transformation. Issues that are challenging for women. For example, when you finish in fact, before you start your articles, it's difficult to get into a law firm to article, because most law firm will have issue of being skeptical to accept you, because chances of becoming pregnant along the way, And then sometimes that might come as a challenge for the fact that to go an article, the salary is not as great. So not everybody is prepared to go an article. So you sacrifice a lot of things. You article, you do what you can do. And then some of the other challenges to end up where you go to as far as acting. In fact, it's all about having to be mentored and trained and built in that self-confidence. Because for us, especially when you are sitting like where I'm sitting now, it's not one of those easy tasks to come and do because it's quite nerve-wracking. So if that self-confidence is so built in well into women, I believe there won't be problems to call women in to come and assist or come forward for acting positions. Because the challenges that you get, it's quite alarming to go to the bench in the first place. It's not an easy task because you ask yourself, will I be able to make it? Will I be competent enough? Will I be good enough? And then if these answers are not answered by yourself or by any other person, it makes it difficult to say, let me go forward and nominate myself. But in terms of transformation, I would believe it's kind of getting there, although but slowly. So it's not easy for a woman to come up and say, I'm going forward and accept a position of invitation to go and act as a bench, because you're already scared to come forward. But now if these things are corrected and you are given enough self-confidence, then I don't think the challenges can be a big issue. They can be a big problem. Because fortunately, for me to come and sit here today, I had an acting stint of 1 year. It built in that confidence little bit by little bit that makes me to be able to come and sit here. So with regard to transformation, it's quite an issue that women have really face challenges of going ahead and putting themselves forward.
Do you find this environment that you are in now being very friendly to you?
Do I find, sorry, sir?
The process you are in now, the interviews, is it very friendly to you?
The process is friendly, though nerve-wracking. That's why I'm saying if your self-confidence has been well motivated, you've been trained, you've been put through challenges, you've been mentored and so forth. So it makes coming to sit to the proceedings not actually an easy task, but it makes you confident enough to come and sit in front of the panel. But if you go back and think, for example, when we talk amongst ourselves, women, people are like, it's quite difficult to go there. I'm sorry, I cannot go there. It's not an easy part to go there. And for me, it's an experience to come and sit also in front of the panel. Because the more you come and sit in front of the panel, it makes it easier for you to relax and realize it's not as bad as it looks from outside.
Lastly, I'll be failing if I don't commend you for making it possible for us as fathers to have rights to our children, not being frustrated by their mothers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mlambo.
Thank you, CJ. Good afternoon, Mrs. Chesiwe.
Good afternoon, Dr. Mlambo.
Just a few questions. I just want to get your feel, since you want to be a High Court judge. You say in your application you were in the family advocate for 8 years.
Yes, sir.
And before that, you were admitted in 2006.
Yeah, correct.
Now, in your application, you described the matters you've handled, and you said 100% criminal and about 60% constitutional. I would like to understand that 60%.
When I wrote, it's an error on my side, on my judgment. When I wrote those percentages, in my mind I had calculated each one 100%. I was actually supposed to have made them in totality 100%. So it's an error that I made that I realized that I should not have done. I should have made it, so in totality it's 100%.
I failed maths at school, that's why I'm a lawyer. So
Same applies here, sir.
I'm not interested in that part. I'm interested in the content of the constitutional work you say you did. What did you do?
Mostly what we did, because with going around, especially on awareness campaigns regarding to constitutional Bill of Rights, when I going to the rural areas, teaching people about the Constitution, how it works, and telling them what are their basic rights, because not everybody understands how the Constitution works. So what mostly with regard to although litigation-wise was not a lot, but mostly the awareness of the Constitution is mostly what I used to do when we do awareness campaigns.
Okay. So you don't refer to actual cases you did, constitutional
Actual
cases?
cases were not as much as the awarenesses.
Did you do constitutional cases?
One or two, but not many during the attorney days. It was not a lot. Because it was not always that people would come forth with complaints about their rights.
Yeah. I also looked at the judgments you attached. They all deal with criminal matters. Am I correct?
You're correct, because the criminal matters, the load is more.
Yeah. You've been acting for 8 months, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it? Since the beginning of this year.
Since the beginning of this year.
Did you sit in the opposed motion court?
I've sat in opposed motion courts in many matters, road accident fund matters, default matters, sometimes some of the opposed matters. The morning before the trial starts, the parties will come and tell you the parties have settled, and then they give you a settlement order. But I have done, not long ago, an opposed matter of road accident fund, in which I wrote a judgment.
Yeah, I think that's where my interest is. You just attach criminal law judgments. You say you wrote opposed motion judgments.
Yes, I did so.
And you have the unopposed court in the Free State, isn't it? Did you sit in that court?
I did it recently. I've been doing it a lot also, because I was on recess duty for the past 2 weeks. Last week I did the motion court also and unopposed matters.
Yeah. You also say in your application you've appeared in the High Court.
As an attorney, I used to appear in the High Court a lot.
Uh-huh.
But mostly it will be your divorce matters, insolvency matters, or it will be those matters that I would appear in courts as an attorney.
Yeah. For how long were you an attorney?
Since my date of admission, because when I went to the family advocate's office,
Yes.
I worked as a family advocate, but I did not remove myself from the attorney's role. I remained an attorney because the office did not have, the post was either you are an attorney or an admitted attorney or an advocate.
Yes.
So I've been an attorney ever since.
Oh, okay. Maybe I misunderstood that part. So why as a family advocate you've been appearing in the High Court?
I've been appearing as a family advocate also at the High Court.
Okay,
With regard to the child's best interest of a child.
Right. Something that also struck me, you say you were a candidate attorney from 2001 to 2006. That can't be right.
It can't be right, because I was an attorney from 2001 when I graduated.
Yes.
I did 2 years articles at the same law firm.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, JP. Commissioner Singh.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Mr.
Afternoon,
Chesiwe.
sir.
I note from the papers that have been given to us that you came before the Commission on the 9th of April 2013. You were interviewed
Yes.
for a position on the Electoral Court.
Correct, sir.
I would just like to know if your passion or interest to serve on the Electoral Court has waned since then.
When I came, the complication that I had then, because if Judge JP Khomu is here, that time the position was I was still in government, so it was a problem for me to be, because I was informed that it's not a full-time, it's kind of like part-time. So I was still employed in government as a family advocate, so it was difficult for me to continue with it. So then I had to go back and review it. But it's not like it has moved away. It's still one of those things that for me, being an electoral judge, is still part of being in the High Court, being able to serve as a judge. And even better as an electoral judge, because you are doing a much more contribution with regard to elections itself.
During that interview, there was a question from Commissioner Sibanyoni where he says, I noticed that on page 3 of your questionnaire, question 8, you stated when you were asked about membership of any political organization, past and present, you mentioned that, and I quote, ANC 10 years, DA 5 years, close quote. And then he went on to ask you, are you currently a member of a political organization? And then you gave an answer. And maybe you can just tell us about that answer. But what I note from that questioning is, in this current question under item 8, when you ask the question, please furnish particulars of your membership of any political organization, past and present, you say none. Isn't there a bit of a contradiction there?
After that elections, after those interviews, I relinquished all memberships. And I think for the past 5 years, I've not been any active or participant in any political parties, because I realized if I want to go to the bench, I need to be apolitical. So I did not take any memberships up since then.
But the answer to the question should have been, because they're asking you about the past. Yes, member of a political organization, ANC 10 years, DA 5 years. But you put none, because the past, they don't ask you about the recent past or how long ago, but the past is the past.
It might also be around my judgment, because when I looked at it, I told myself it's 5, 6 years ago. It's kind of like, it's a long time ago. It's not as recent as like past now. So I looked at it, it's more than 5 years ago that I've not been a member of any political party. That's maybe an error that I didn't look at it, that it's like as in past. So I didn't put it in, for to me it was not as recent as past.
So this reminded me of the prescription law. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Commissioner Singh. Commissioner Kavasha.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
You speak of appearances in court, both as an attorney and as an advocate. I just want to understand that. Appearances as going to court, representing client, making representations, and having an opponent who does the same, that's what you're talking about. Yes. Not going to court as a witness and just reading through a report.
Appearing as representing somebody.
As in representing somebody.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clear that up. The second question through you, CJ, is in relation to working with more senior people, and I'll take the example of sitting in an appeal. One of my more difficult experiences and I'd like to say as a woman, but maybe just as a South African, was in disagreeing with a senior about a particular outcome in an appeal. But it's difficult because, and I was a very new acting judge at the time. I was just wondering, how do you handle a situation like that? Are you able to stand your ground? I mean, what do you do in those circumstances?
Quite a difficult one, because as an acting judge, they are your seniors. They guide you. But now, in principle, when there's something that you don't agree with, and I believe if you are professionals, both of you, matured legal people, it shouldn't be a problem. I recently had one where we have not agreed with my senior judge, and she's going to write something else and I will write something else. But we took it quite well. And it's one of those things that it's not an easy thing to do, because it's one of my senior judges who's quite kind of very strict also. But we agreed, and she said, no, Sharon, you go and write your part, I'll write my part. But now if you talk about it well, and if a person is also humble, you don't do it with arrogance, it will not be a problem, because you are able to talk to each other about it, and not coming forth as I know better than you, I recently qualified. That kind of attitude should not be there. If you are able to look at it and you talk about it and you discuss it, I don't think it's quite a big problem.
My last question, you say you find that you're coping very well.
I'm coping very well
as an acting judge.
Yes, I'm coping quite very well.
I just want to share with you that I don't cope. I manage, but I don't cope. It's a very difficult job, especially if you're married, and I see that you are.
I am, yes.
And you, as you've said, and you have children.
Yes. And grandchildren.
And even worse, you've got grandchildren.
This thing with your parents.
So what is your coping mechanism? I find I take work home over the weekends. I work over public holidays because I don't want reserved judgments when I leave the court. How do you cope? What's your coping mechanism?
You know what? For me, it's your organizational skills, your management skills, your time management, if you put all those things together, you're easy to manage. Because my last born daughter is in grade 12, she's at hostel. So during the day, nobody's at home. My husband is working. So when they are at work and everybody's going somewhere, I'm sitting at home all by myself, I write a judgment or two and let it go. And when I'm on circuit, whilst the trial is running, the night at the hotel where you are staying, you will be quickly writing another judgment because this other trial is running. And it's all about motivation, energy. You know, motivate yourself, energize yourself, and run with it and keep on going. Because especially if you are healthy, it makes it even better. You run with the full energy that you have.
I take my hat off to you. Thank you. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Commissioner Kavashi. Commissioner Nokesi.
Thank you, CJ. I just want to follow up on the questions that Judge Mlango posed on you. When you were asked about your opposed matters, you gave the answer you gave is that those cases will be settled. Those were personal injury claims and all that. Am I right?
The matters that the opposed
matters that you had as opposed
yes.
application. Am I
Yes,
correct?
yeah. Some will be settled the day of the morning of the trial. Some will be postponed, and sometimes they might be settled because trying to minimize their legal fees because maybe it has been dragging on too long.
Can you distinguish between opposed applications and trials? Because what you are telling us about would relate to trials.
When there is a matter allocated to me which is a trial and it is an opposed trial, then it runs into a trial where the parties come to court, your witnesses.
No, we were talking specifically, or I'm talking about specifically about opposed applications. Have you presided over
Yes,
opposed
I've
applications?
presided over opposed applications.
Do you have any judgment that you have written in relation to those opposed applications?
With regard to judgments of opposed, I only had one that I recently wrote. But it was an opposed trial. It was not an opposed judgment. It was an opposed trial.
Or the one that you have touched?
No, I did not touch it because I wrote it whilst I was in recess, and by the time I sent my CV, I did the trial after I sent my CV.
Okay. Another problem I have, in your CV, you tell us that Ms. Chesiwe is a superbly qualified and experienced advocate offering 15 years experience. Were you admitted as an advocate?
No, I was not
or as an
admitted
attorney?
As an attorney. I was admitted as an attorney.
But why do you say you're an advocate?
Because when I was at a family advocate's office, I worked as an advocate, but I was not admitted as an advocate. I was an attorney.
Yes, but as a legal practitioner, you know that a person is admitted either as an attorney or as an advocate. Perhaps could be that you become designated as advocate in that office.
In that office, that's what they do. They designate you to that level, but you're still not an advocate.
Lastly, in relation to your practical experience as an attorney, I understand that you were admitted as an attorney on the 9th of June. Is it 2006?
2006.
2006. After 2006, immediately after 2006, what did you do?
I continued working in private practice, in the law firm that I was articling at.
For how long?
I worked there at that law firm for what? For, not adding my article years, because article was 2 years. I worked for the law firm plus minus about 3 years, and then I left.
You left and joined the family
advocate, yes.
And in the family advocate, for how long did you remain?
I remained there for 8 years.
Right. After you came from the family advocate, you were appointed as an acting magistrate.
No, while I was at private practice, I was appointed as an acting magistrate. Because during the time I was in a private practice, I went to act as a magistrate. And then I went back to private practice, the same practice, because they allowed me to go. But I came back to the practice again.
The reason why I'm asking, just you can disagree with me, I just want to suggest that you didn't have much time for practice. You still need more exposure and experience in practice, so that you understand this thing, because I have difficulty with you having presided only in one opposed motion court application.
Should I respond to that? Like I said, it's difficult because you do the cases that you are allocated to. If the JP give me one case or two cases, I cannot. I do what I've been the task I've been allocated to.
Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner Nokesi. Commissioner Nsebeza.
Thank you, Chief Justice. No further questions. No questions.
Thank you, Ms. Chesiwe. Oh, yes, JP.
Thanks for one as a follow-up to the question that was asked by Advocate Kabashe regarding whether you can stand your ground where you have a disagreement with the senior judge that you are sitting with in an appeal. Is it correct that there's an appeal where the two of us sat together and we could not agree, and it has since been referred to be heard by 3 judges?
Correctly so. I forgot that one because I was thinking of the other one was the other judge. But correctly so, there's one that me and you couldn't agree. So it had to be sent to somebody else. So I am able to stand my ground if needs be.
The last question just pertains to opposed motions that you have done. Opposed motions are those cases that we do on Thursdays, not the trials. Now, how many opposed motion cases have you presided over, not the trials?
I've had a lot of opposed motion that I presided over. Your Rule 43s, your many other matters that came on Thursdays for opposed on Thursdays.
Is it correct that in our division, when you are not in the criminal court, then on every Thursday you will be in the opposed motion role?
Yes, it's correct, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chesiwe. You're excused.
Thank you. I wish to say thank you to the panel. Thank you.